They are ghosts on the sand, fleeting moments captured in mud 2 millennia ago. The simple act of a foot pressing into wet earth, a life lived, a path taken. For thousands of years, these secrets lay buried, protected by the shifting dunes of a wild Scottish coastline. Then a storm, a violent unleashing of wind and water, peeled back the layers of time, and for a brief, brilliant moment, they were revealed. But the same brutal forces that gave them back to the light also came to reclaim them. This is the story of an impossible discovery and the frantic race against the clock to save the ghost prints of Lunan Bay before they disappeared forever.
It all starts, as so many great discoveries do, not in a lab or a library, but with a walk on the beach. On the eastern coast of Scotland, near Angus, lies the sweeping, beautiful expanse of Lunan Bay. After a winter storm had passed, whipping the coast with winds gusting over 55 miles per hour, two local residents, Ivor Campbell and Jenny Snedden, were walking their dogs, Ziggy and Juno, along the shore. The storm had done more than just churn the sea. It had scoured the beach, stripping away tons of protective sand from the dunes. Where there was once just an endless stretch of sand, a new surface was exposed, a strange, dark layer of clay. And in that clay, Ivor noticed a series of distinct, unusual indentations. These weren't random marks left by the tide. They were patterned, deliberate. They were footprints. Ivor and Jenny knew this was something special, and they had to act fast. They contacted the local council archaeologist, Bruce Mann, who immediately understood the potential significance of the find and the extreme urgency of the situation. He made a call that would trigger what he called a genuine archaeological emergency. A team from the University of Aberdeen, led by Professor Kate Britton, was mobilized. The clock was now ticking. Every crashing wave, every grain of wind-blown sand was an act of erasure. The ghost prints had appeared, but they were already beginning to fade.
When Professor Britton and her team arrived at Lunan Bay, they were met with a scene of controlled chaos. The team described the conditions as some of the worst they'd ever encountered for archaeological fieldwork. The wind was a physical force, a relentless 55-mile-per-hour gale that blasted them with sand, stinging their faces and threatening to scour the delicate prints into oblivion. And then there was the tide. The sea was coming in fast. With every high tide, the waves clawed at the edges of the exposed clay, ripping away entire sections of the site. It was a battlefield, with the archaeologists caught in a crossfire between the wind and the waves. The very elements that had granted them this extraordinary glimpse into the past were now working furiously to snatch it back. There was no time for a gentle, methodical excavation. This was archaeological triage. The team had to document everything they could as fast as they could before it was all gone. They worked with a desperate intensity, their movements urgent but precise. Knowing the fragility of the site, they had stopped at a local craft store on the way, buying up supplies of plaster of Paris, a simple, almost comically low-tech solution for an incredibly high-stakes problem. Their mission was twofold: physically preserve what they could and digitally capture everything else. Drones were sent up during brief lulls in the wind, their cameras mapping the entire site with millimeter accuracy. Hundreds, then thousands of photographs were taken from every conceivable angle. This technique, called photogrammetry, would allow them to later build a perfect three-dimensional digital model of the site in the lab, a digital ghost to match the ghost prints in the sand. Simultaneously, team members knelt in the freezing sand and wind, carefully cleaning the delicate prints. They worked against the roar of the ocean, a constant reminder of their deadline. Every footprint was a question. Who made these? When did they live? What were they doing on this stretch of coast 2,000 years ago? The answers were right there in the mud beneath their feet, but they had only hours to read them.
As the first day wore on, amidst the frantic scramble, the first incredible breakthroughs began to emerge. The team's initial assessment on the windswept beach confirmed their hopes. These weren't just a few random marks, but an entire tableau of ancient life. They identified the clear, barefoot impressions of humans. The size and spacing of the prints suggested the presence of adults and even younger individuals, a community moving across this landscape. They were seeing the steps of a family, a hunting party, a group of gatherers, frozen in time. But they weren't alone. Careful cleaning revealed other, non-human prints mixed in with the human ones. There were the cloven hoof prints of roe deer and the larger, more distinct tracks of red deer. Suddenly, the picture became richer, more complex. This wasn't just a story about people, it was a story about an entire ecosystem. This ancient, muddy flat, once a salt marsh or estuary, was a place teeming with life, a shared landscape where humans and animals coexisted. The people who walked here may have been hunting those very deer, or perhaps foraging for coastal plants like samphire as the animals grazed nearby. This discovery turned the site from a simple set of footprints into a dynamic snapshot of daily life. These weren't the graves of kings or the monuments of warriors. These were the ephemeral traces of ordinary people engaged in the timeless, everyday tasks of survival and sustenance. While the high-tech drone scans and digital photography continued, the team also turned to their craft store plaster. This was a race to create physical evidence. Kneeling against the wind, they carefully mixed the plaster of Paris and gently poured it into the best-preserved prints, creating perfect, tangible casts. It was a moment that beautifully captured the reality of field archaeology, a blend of cutting-edge technology and resourceful, hands-on improvisation. Each cast they pulled from the clay was a small, crucial victory against the encroaching sea. It was one more piece of the past they had physically rescued, a solid piece of history pulled from the edge of oblivion.
So, to really get why the team was fighting so hard, we have to pull back from the wind-lashed beach and travel back in time, back 2,000 years. Radiocarbon dating of preserved plant material found just beneath the footprints would later confirm this age, placing the people of Lunan Bay at a pivotal, dramatic moment in Scottish history, the Late Iron Age. This was Scotland just before the Romans. At the time these barefoot prints were pressed into the mud, the Roman Empire was at its height, a colossal power stretching across the known world, and its legions were pushing north. The people of Lunan Bay were living in a world that was on the cusp of a violent, transformative collision of cultures. They were the last generations of a purely native Iron Age Scotland. Their society was one of tribal territories, a Celtic world of warriors and farmers. People lived in small settlements, often in distinctive timber and stone roundhouses, some of which were built on artificial islands in lochs, known as crannogs. They farmed, raised cattle and sheep, and supplemented their diet by hunting and foraging in landscapes just like the one at Lunan Bay. But this world was about to be irrevocably changed. Soon the Roman military machine would arrive in force. Around 142 AD, the Emperor Antoninus Pius would order the construction of the Antonine Wall, a massive turf and stone barrier stretching across Scotland's central belt, marking the northernmost frontier of their vast empire. Roman forts sprang up across the landscape, garrisoned by a diverse mix of soldiers from across the empire. The arrival of this globalized military force would have been a profound shock. The people who left their footprints at Lunan Bay would have had no knowledge of the centuries of conflict and cultural change that were to come. They were not yet the people the Romans would call the Picts. They were simply living their lives, walking barefoot across a muddy estuary, unaware that they stood on the precipice of history. And that is what makes these prints so profoundly important. They are a direct, personal link to the people of this lost world, a world before the Roman eagle cast its shadow over the land.
Saving a ghost is no easy task. The footprints at Lunan Bay were the very definition of ephemeral. As project collaborator Dr. William Mills noted, it's incredibly rare to see such a delicate record saved, something that took only minutes to create, yet could be destroyed in a matter of hours. To save these fleeting moments, the archaeologists had to deploy a suite of sophisticated techniques, turning their windswept beach into a high-tech preservation laboratory. The most crucial tool in their arsenal was 3D modeling, built through the process of photogrammetry. Imagine trying to describe a complex three-dimensional object using only words or a single photograph. It's nearly impossible. Now imagine that object is a faint impression in wet clay that is actively being destroyed by wind and water. That's the problem photogrammetry solves. By taking thousands of high-resolution overlapping photographs from multiple angles, the team gathered a massive dataset. Back in the lab, powerful software analyzes these images, identifies common points, and calculates the precise position of millions of points on the surface of the footprints themselves. It's then stitched together to create a stunningly detailed, fully interactive 3D model. It's like creating a digital fossil. Archaeologists can now, from their lab, zoom in on the prints, rotate them, measure their depth and width with sub-millimeter precision, and even apply different lighting to reveal details invisible to the naked eye. The drone surveys provided the broader map of the entire site, while the close-up photogrammetry captured the intimate details. The digital record they created is now permanent, immune to the tides that wash the real site away. Alongside this cutting-edge digital work were the plaster casts. This age-old technique provided something the digital models couldn't: a tangible, physical replica. A cast captures the one-to-one scale and texture of the print, a piece of the past you can hold in your hand. For the team on the beach, pouring the plaster was a moment of profound connection. By combining the digital and the physical, the team executed a comprehensive preservation strategy, ensuring that even if the original site was doomed, its story would be saved.
24 hours, that was the critical window. The first day's frantic work had yielded incredible results, but the scale of the site was daunting, and the tide was a relentless enemy. As the second day dawned, a palpable sense of urgency hung in the salty air. The worst of the wind had perhaps subsided, but the sea remained a constant looming threat. The archaeologists knew that the next high tide could be catastrophic. It wouldn't just nibble at the edges, it had the potential to submerge and obliterate the entire exposed clay bed. The window of opportunity, thrown open so unexpectedly by the storm, was now slamming shut. The progress was visible. Sections of the site were dotted with the white circles of newly made plaster casts, and the photographers had systematically worked their way across large areas. The drone had successfully completed its mapping flights, but vast patches of the dark clay remained undocumented, each one holding countless impressions, a complex tapestry of human and animal movement that was still unread. Every footprint told a story. The splay of toes in the mud could speak to the weight of an individual. The length of a stride could hint at whether they were walking casually or running. The overlap of human and animal prints could suggest pursuit or simply a shared path. Losing any of these details meant losing a piece of the narrative. The team was exhausted, running on adrenaline and a shared sense of purpose. They had been battered by the elements, working in freezing conditions with little rest. Ivor and Jenny, the dog walkers who had started it all, remained on site, helping out by carrying buckets and, crucially, making cups of tea, providing a small but vital boost to morale. It was a poignant scene, a small group of dedicated experts and passionate locals united in a desperate fight against the immense, impersonal power of the ocean. They were fighting for ghosts, for the faint whispers of a long-dead past, and they all knew the final, most desperate hours of that fight were now upon them.
The final hours at Lunan Bay were a masterclass in controlled desperation. The tension on the beach was electric. The rhythmic crash of the waves was no longer just background noise. It was the ticking of a doomsday clock. The sea was visibly closer, its white-capped fingers creeping further up the beach with every surge. All pretense of a normal archaeological pace was gone. The team moved with a heightened, focused energy. No leisurely breaks, no extended discussions. Every action was precise and economical, born of the knowledge that every second counted. The drone was grounded. It was all down to groundwork now. Photographers scrambled to capture the last remaining sections, their bodies hunched against the wind. Others rushed to mix the last batches of plaster, working quickly before it could set in the buckets. They focused on the most unique prints, a particularly clear human heel, the delicate V shape of a deer's hoof, a cluster of tracks that told a story. Each cast poured felt like a final, defiant act against the inevitable. Professor Britton and her senior colleagues moved across the site, making final calls on what to prioritize. Which area holds the most data? Which prints are most at risk? Their eyes scanned the clay, reading the ancient landscape one last time, committing its patterns to memory. They were no longer just scientists, they were custodians of a fleeting moment. The air grew thick with salt spray. The sound of the waves grew from a roar to a thunderous cannonade. The team worked right up to the water's edge, retreating only when the cold North Sea washed over their boots. There was a palpable sense of heartbreak in the air, knowing that despite their heroic efforts, they couldn't save it all. They were just snatching fragments from the jaws of oblivion.
And then it was over. The first wave to breach the main site wasn't a cataclysmic tsunami, but a quiet, insidious sheet of water that flowed across the dark clay. It filled the hollow of a 2,000-year-old footprint, pooling for a moment in the shape of a human heel before spilling over. Another wave followed, and another, each one pushing further, higher. The archaeologists stood back, exhausted and silent, their equipment packed, their hands raw from the cold and the plaster. They could do nothing now but watch. The water washed over the site, and the ghosts vanished. The sharp edges of the prints softened, the details dissolving into a blur. The intricate network of human and animal tracks that had told such a rich story was smoothed away, the slate wiped clean. Within minutes, the ancient clay surface that had been exposed for just a few precious days was once again a featureless, glistening bed of mud under the churning sea. The tide, which had been their adversary, had finally won. Standing on the shore, watching the site being destroyed, was heartbreaking. The frantic race was finished. An eerie silence fell over the team, broken only by the timeless sound of the ocean. The ghost prints of Lunan Bay were gone.
The water took the beach, but it could not take the data. The frantic race had ended in physical loss, but it was, remarkably, an archaeological victory. Back in the University of Aberdeen labs, far from the Lunan Bay surf, the true extent of what was saved began to come to light. The thousands of photographs were fed into computers, and slowly, miraculously, the ghost prints began to reappear. On screen, the 3D models emerged until the entire site was resurrected in breathtaking digital detail. The archaeologists could now fly through the site as if in a drone, zoom in on a single toe print, and analyze the landscape from any angle, free from the pressures of wind and tide. The physical casts, carefully transported, provided the tangible link. They could be hailed, studied, and displayed, a solid testament to the lives they represent. Together, the digital and physical records formed a comprehensive archive of a site that no longer exists. And the story they told was extraordinary. As Professor Gordon Noble remarked, it's incredibly exciting to think these prints were made by people around the time of the Roman invasions of Scotland and in the centuries leading up to the emergence of the Picts. They are a window into the lives of the ancestors of a people who would define early Scottish history. They weren't Picts yet, but their descendants would become them. The prints connect us not to kings or great events, but to the quiet, anonymous continuity of human life.
The story of Lunan Bay is more than just a single dramatic discovery. It's a powerful warning. All around the world, our coastlines are eroding at an accelerating rate. Buried within these coastlines is an immeasurable wealth of archaeological evidence, settlements, shipwrecks, and fragile sites just like Lunan Bay. This discovery was the first of its kind in Scotland, though similar footprint sites have been found and lost in England. It proves that Scotland's coasts hold incredible, delicate secrets. The paradox is that the very forces of erosion that are destroying these sites are also the forces that reveal them. This creates incredibly narrow windows of opportunity. Without the quick thinking of Ivor Campbell and Jenny Snedden, the ghost prints would have vanished without anyone ever knowing they were there. It's a powerful reminder that some of the most important discoveries begin with the public. The frantic effort to save the ghost prints of Lunan Bay is a testament to the dedication of archaeologists and the importance of public vigilance. It shows us that history isn't just in books, it's written in the land itself, and sometimes it's as fragile as a footprint in the sand. The team's work ensured that even though the tide won the battle for the beach, the story of the people who walked there 2,000 years ago has been saved for generations to come. What other secrets do you think are buried beneath our coastlines, just waiting for the right storm to reveal them? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story of discovery and desperation as fascinating as we did, please give this video a like and subscribe for more journeys into the past. Click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Until next time, keep searching.